Friday News or call our offices for more information. Brew up some fun, because I know this congregation likes coffee. If you are interested in volunteering for coffee hour, or if you lead any activities that occasionally need coffee, or if you just want to learn how to brew with our brand new professional coffee brewer, join Christine Davidson for a brief training on our new professional coffee brewer during coffee hour today from 11:15 to 11:40. See you there. One last announcement, Reverend Dr. Terasa Cooley shared with me that because you all have been so diligent in making sure that you don't fall for phishing email scams, and because AI has become so robust, we have yet more of them coming. So please do be diligent and careful. Reverend Terasa will never ask you to send her gift cards or any of those things and the likes. Now please rise as willing and able to join us in Love Will Guide Us.
Jesus tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Jesus tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Dr. Terasa Cooley. I serve as your developmental minister, and I'm so impressed that so many of you are here this morning. We thought maybe there would be 20 of you, so thank God for the choir. But we have so many that we ran out of orders of service, so if you would like to share, that would be great. So we begin this service by acknowledging that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Adena, Hopewell, Wyandotte, Miami, Seneca, Erie, and Cayuga people. We cultivate this awareness that concrete acts of solidarity, healing, and reparation accompany our symbolic acknowledgments. So let us enter into the spirit of worship with these words. How many nights must it take one such as me to learn that we aren't, after all, made from that bird that flies out of its ashes? That for us, as we go up in flames, our one work is to open ourselves, to be the flames. So let us all rise in body or in spirit while our children meet in the back to bring in the light. Please turn to your neighbors and introduce yourselves to one another and maybe what brought you here this morning. We need the warmth. now time for the children to bring in the light. Great to see you all here this morning. Our chalice lighting words come from the Reverend Maureen Killoran. In these hard times, let us look first to the response of love. In the midst of challenge, may our chalice flame bear witness to the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. In the midst of uncertainty, may our chalice be a beacon of encouragement that our values may guide our choices. Let us look first to the response of love as we light our chalice.
Thank you, Lincoln, for your help lighting our chalice today. I will find my page eventually. Good morning. I am Cameron Manjan Betts. I'm a young adult member of this congregation, and my pronouns are she, they. Today's story is called What Happened to You? Written by James Catchpole and illustrated by Karen George. Joe was playing his favorite game. It had sharks, and possibly crocodiles. But crocodiles and sharks were no match for pirates like Joe. Not this time, Senor Sharkface. Sharks were easy compared to kids Joe hadn't met yet. You've only got one leg, said a kid. Yep, said Joe, and you've just squashed my shark. What happened to you? Said the kid. But Joe didn't feel like telling them that story, so he just said, what do you think? The kid didn't know how to answer that. But another kid did. Did it fall off? No, said Joe. A third kid thought that was silly. Legs don't fall off, she said. Kid number 4 agreed. He asked, was it a burglar? Then kid 2 thought very hard and said, did it fall off in the toilet? No and no, said Joe. This is a trick, isn't it? You're hiding it, said kid number 5. No, said Joe, and stop staring at my bottom. There were more questions. But where's your leg? Here. Which Joe did try to answer. But where's your other leg? What other leg? Though some of them, was it a lion? were a bit silly. Was it 1,000 lions? Yes, said Joe. It was 1,000 lions. Really? Said the kids. No, shouted Joe. Joe was playing his game again. But this time, Kid 1 said, "Is that a crocodile down there?" And Joe said, "Yes, I think so." "My name is Simone," said Kid 1. "My name's Joe," said Joe. "And there are sharks down there too. They especially like to eat pirates." "Pirates?" said Simone. "Pirates," said Joe. "Cool," said Simone. And Yuto and Casper and Maney and Ibrahim. And all the kids seemed happy with that. Later, Simone asked, "Do you ever get tired of people asking questions about your leg?" "What do you think?" said Joe. Simone did know how to answer that. But Joe had a question of his own. "Do you still need to know what happened?" "No," said Simone. And Joe seemed happy with that. And the end. This story is based on the author's real childhood experiences, and it reminds us that while it's okay to feel curious, ultimately, we are not entitled to know why someone is the way they are, or to demand personal details about the things we perceive as different. The connections we make and the things we share are actually much more important. All right, together, let us sing our young people back to their families and out to class.
In the month of January, we will be dedicating our donations to the Bottoms Up Diaper Bank. Since its inception, Bottoms Up has delivered more than 3 million diapers to over 70 food pantries and child care facilities in 16 counties in Ohio, ensuring that all families have access to the diapers that they need to keep their children clean, dry, and healthy. So we invite you to contribute to this incredibly worthy cause. You can use the QR code on the order of service, text the number on the screen, or go to our website and click the Donate tab to share as you feel called. Your gifts help build a better church and a better world. Our offering will now be gratefully received. We have some joys and concerns to share with you this morning. Florence Jane and Sandy Cohen are happy to introduce their grandson, Felix Cohen Petruzzello, born on December 20th, 2023. His parents are Emily Jane Cohen and Ian Petruzzello. Sorry, I knew I would mess that up. So congratulations on your new grandchild. We send healing thoughts to Linda Smith, who was home after total shoulder replacement surgery. She is recovering well. And our condolences to Kim Radersdorf and her partner, Suzanne. Kim's father, Gerald Radersdorf, died recently. He had been in a memory care unit at Westminster Thurber for some time. He was 95 years old. We hold all of these joys and concerns, spoken and unspoken, in our hearts as we take a moment of silence together. We gather on a weekend dedicated to the prophet Martin Luther King and his prophecy. While the theme of this service is not necessarily related to him or his work, it feels essential this morning to offer some of his words nevertheless. And this is from his book, Beyond Vietnam. So please join me in the spirit of meditation as we listen to his words. This call for a worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all humankind. This oft misunderstood, this oft misinterpreted concept, so readily dismissed by the Nietzsches of the world as weak and cowardly force, has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of humankind. And when I speak of love, I'm not speaking of something sentimental or weak. I'm not speaking of that force which is just emotional bosh. I am speaking of that force which all of the great religions have seen as the supreme unifying principle of life. Love is somehow the key that unlocks the door which leads to ultimate reality. This Hindu, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist belief about ultimate reality is beautifully summed up in the first epistle of St. John. Let us love one another, for love is God. And everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth God, for God is love. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and his love is perfected in us. Let us hope that this spirit will become the order of the day. Let us all share in this great prayer. Amen. Thank you, choir. I haven't had a chance to tell you how wonderful the music service was at Christmas time. I was home preparing for my surgery, and I guarantee you watching it online was, I'm sure, not as good as watching it in person, but even that was spectacular. So thank you very much for your hard work. Thanks. Our reading today comes from one of my favorite authors, Kate Bowler. Her first book was called Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. Her second book, which this reading is from, is called No Cure for Being Human. Kate Bowler has survived stage 4 colon cancer beyond all expectations and has written widely and has a wonderful podcast about encountering incredibly difficult things. And she writes this: a few years ago, in between scans, I decided to make the pilgrimage with my family to see one of the 7 natural wonders of the world, the Grand Canyon. A worthy bucket list item. Just off Route 66, I found a tiny chapel surrounded by ponderosa pine. No town for miles. Curious, I tried the door and finding it unlocked, I tentatively walked inside. The room was a miniature sanctuary, unheated, inelegant. The floor was loose gravel. Someone had nailed together some benches to face a chunk of stone serving as an altar. But the light of the setting sun, an incandescent orange, poured through the windows and lit up the walls, which were covered with graffiti, both fresh and faded. I ran my fingers along the black ink covering the altar and the pen marks gouging the soft wood. Almost every inch of it was covered with words like these: I miss you every day. Please let my daughter be the way she was before. Did you make it to heaven, my love? Helen, I am weak, but you already knew that. I looked up. Hundreds of slips of paper were stuffed into the rafters and seams in the wall. All the people who have fallen into the cracks in the universe, undone by the smallest tragedies. We try to outsmart our limitations and our bad luck, but here we are shouting the truth into the abyss. There is no cure for being human. Please stay seated as we sing our meditative hymn.
The peace not past our understanding falls, like light upon the soft white tablecloth, at winter supper warm between 4 walls, a thing too simple to be tried as truth. Not scholars calm, nor gift of church or state, nor everlasting date of death's release, but careless noon the houses lighted late, harvest and holiday, the people's peace. Days into years, the doorways worn at sail. Years into lives, the plans for long increase. Come true at last for those of God's good will. These are the things we mean by saying peace.
A number of years ago, I was bitten quite badly by one of my cats. Lily was her name, and she was usually the most docile of cats. But I was in the process of moving, and I decided it was necessary to put my 2 cats in the closet to keep them from escaping when the movers came. And so my partner at the time and I came up with a very ingenious way to get them into the closet. We stood the mattress and the box spring on their sides and created a little alleyway through which we could herd the cats. So we did, closed the door, cats were in there. And then we realized, oh, The roll of plastic bags is also in the closet. And we all know how necessary plastic bags are for moving. So we opened the door and I got the plastic bags, but Lily managed to sneak out of the door. And my partner clamped his hand down on top of her and she turned into a blender. She started biting and scratching and meowing and screaming. And I reached in to try to grab her from my partner, and I got a few bites in as well. So here we were, covered with blood and piss and in incredible pain. He managed to shake her off into the closet, and the move went on. By the end of the day, his hands were so swollen he couldn't do anything with them. I took him to the emergency room and dropped him off so I could then take the cats to their new home. This transport went more easily than the last. When I got them inside, my partner called me and told me I had to come to the hospital as well. It seems that cat bites are particularly venomous and have to be treated with IV antibiotics. By the time I got there, there were no more rooms available, and I had to spend a very uncomfortable and painful night on a gurney in the emergency room, contemplating how quickly we had both gone from being totally healthy to being suddenly hospitalized. Anyone who's been in an accident or suffered a fall will know the feeling of suddenly realizing how precarious life is. There were certainly things we could have done to prevent Lily from behaving as she did, but given that she had always been so sweet, we never expected her to become demonic. When such things happen, we come face to face with how little control we really have over what happens to our bodies. Nothing has made this more apparent to us than the pandemic. Even with vaccines and boosters, we know that all of us are still in some way vulnerable, and this runs completely counter to the common mythology that we can conquer all illness and control ourselves into perfect health. I think we all know the falsity of this idea at this point, but there are still strains of it in how we talk about health and our relationship to our bodies. I was raised by my Unitarian Universalist parents on the gospel of good health. My father had been rather sickly as a child, and he was determined to do all that he could do to be as healthy as possible. White bread, canned food, frozen food were not allowed at our table. He had read Adele Davis's bestseller, Eat Right to Keep Fit, and that became his Bible. Almost before we could read, my sister and I knew the difference between acerola and rose hips and vitamin C. We could discourse at length about the proper balance of vitamin B. We learned to swallow copious amounts of vitamins in one swallow. My father was so proud of our abilities, he would have us perform this skill for house guests. Some parents have their children tap dance, we swallowed vitamins. I did not always swallow his dogma, however, and would regularly sneak over to friends' houses to have processed peanut butter and jelly on white bread. Nirvana. This notion that all problems physical could be fixed seemed to be proven when I was a toddler. I was born with my feet splayed outward and I just couldn't seem to walk. After several attempts to figure out the problem, my mother found an orthopedist who diagnosed it. I had a syndrome called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which makes connective tissue extremely loose. He put me in corrective shoes to support my feet, and presto, I stood up and walked. Until recently, I think our culture has made this idea of being able to control ourselves into good health into a dominant motif. And certainly advances in modern medicine make us think that ultimately everything can be cured. The whole notion of willpower, the idea that you can just will yourself into perfect and good health with the right attitude, the right diet, the right amount of exercise, still holds sway. I think part of what is still traumatizing to us to this day about the pandemic is the idea that we will never really rid the world of COVID-19, as many of us have learned recently. The idea that we have to simply learn to live with it is now accepted, despite the recent surge in cases. Surely we like to think science will make this all go away. But the truth, of course, is that none of us is in complete control of our health. We know this intellectually, of course we do. But what happens when someone gets diagnosed with an unexpected cancer? Often the first thing that is encouraged is for the person to be tough and to fight hard against the cancer. But isn't that cancer actually a part of our bodies? What does the idea of declaring war on a part of our body really do to our psyche? I can't tell you how many times I've seen some strong-willed person be diagnosed with a terminal illness and vow to fight the disease with all of their willpower. Sometimes some dramatic remissions do take place, but rarely do they last for long. Most often what I see, which breaks my heart even more than the illness, is that these people die thinking of themselves as a failure because they couldn't will themselves back into perfect health. I saw this happen with the most willful person I knew, my father. I talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago. At the age of 63, this man who spent almost his entire adult life trying to control his health was diagnosed with lung cancer from exposure to asbestos. 3 months later, to the day, he died. Despite every kind of treatment known to Western and Eastern medicine, despite the most willful exertions he could muster, he died. And tragically, by the end of his life, he had lost his faith in that gospel of good health that he had proclaimed and felt that much of his efforts had been a waste and that he had failed himself and his family as well. Unitarian Universalists, I find, are particularly susceptible to this belief in control. It is so difficult when we are confronted with the reality of death and of suffering, not to feel that there must be something we can do to change it, to control it, to defeat it at the hands of a willful assertion of personal power. And yet we inevitably fail, for we and our loved ones do suffer and do die. We know and feel that reality now more than ever. All our frenzied efforts to control and manipulate spirit into healthy matter fall apart, and we are left with little for comfort. Our liberal religious heritage abounds with great claims of the power of human beings to transform their lives here on earth. I have fierce pride in this tradition, but I've had to recognize that there's not a great deal in our tradition which lends comfort to the afflicted, or which helps us come to terms with inevitable limitations. Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of our spiritual ancestors, was able to say blithely that the death of a dear friend, wife, brother, lover commonly operates revolutions in our way of life, terminates an epoch of infancy or of youth which was waiting to be closed, breaks up wanted occupation or household or style of living, and allows the formulation of new ones, more friendly to the growth of character. But in his personal writings, Emerson was not so serenely accepting of suffering, particularly when it came to the death of his beloved son, Waldo. When Waldo died at the age of 4, Emerson wrote to Margaret Fuller that my divine temple, which all the angels seemed to love to build and which was shattered in a night, I can never rebuild. Yet the nature of all things and against all appearances and specialities whatever assures us of eternal benefit. But these affirmations are tacit and secular. If spoken, they have a hollow and canting sound. It is hard to resist the need to explain suffering or death. We try to reassure ourselves that through suffering comes new maturity, new understandings of life, all of which is true. But the pain doesn't go away with this awareness. Ask anyone who has lost someone close to them if they would trade what they learned from their pain if they could have but their loved one back. And I think the universal answer would be in a second. We will probably never reach a point where we're comfortable with the idea of death, but perhaps we can learn to be more accepting of our lack of understanding it. I think of the old Zen story in which a novitiate asked his master, "What is death?" And the master responds, "I do not know." The initiate is surprised, "But you are a Zen master." And the master says, "Yes, but I am not a dead Zen master." I've had my own painful lessons to learn in relationship to my health. That syndrome that caused my feet to stick out and my joints to be incredibly loose turned out to be more significant than we initially thought. It was great when I was a kid. I could entertain other kids by lying on my stomach and bringing my feet around and touching my nose. True. But as time and age wore parts of my body down, more and more problems emerged, including the problem with my wrist, which resulted in my recent surgery. And this thing that I have to wear for 2 more months. This was my 27th surgery. This included a complete rebuild of my back, since over time that looseness brought about scoliosis that was undetected until a surgeon finally told me I was at the point where I could be paralyzed, and my breathing was starting to be constricted. I was and continue to be incredibly lucky. I've managed to find excellent surgeons who can put things back together, but I know all too well how precarious this state of health that I now enjoy is. And in many ways, I'm extremely healthy. I have no heart problems, no autoimmune issues, nothing systemic other than my joints. This realization does not send me into despair, and nor do I think there is nothing that we can do to control our health. Obviously there is, or we would not be sitting here, gratis boosters and vaccines. I do believe in the need for exercise and healthy eating. I still swallow a handful of vitamins each day, though admittedly not all at once. I exercise whenever I can, but I believe and do all of this not out of a sense of control, but more a sense of respect and renewal. Respect, because I believe our bodies are a gift of creation, no matter how flawed they may be, and are deserving of being treated with as much respect as possible. And renewal, because in my best moments I have learned that even if life and our embodiment of it isn't completely controllable, it is still worth living to the fullest of our capacities. There's a wonderfully inspiring book by a psychiatrist named Arthur Frank called At the Will of the Body. After experiencing 2 life-threatening illnesses in 1 year, as a very young man, Frank wrote this: "Illness is something to recover from if you can, but recovery is worth only as much as what you learn about the life you are regaining." To focus only on recovery, as we so often do, is to miss the opportunity for the renewal of our soul that comes with any confrontation with limitation. I believe that we do ourselves and others a terrible disservice by holding health and illness as polarities. None of us are completely healthy. All of us have some level of debility that we contend with, or certainly will if we live long enough. But if instead we understood health and illness as being in relationship to one another, if we look for the meaning that comes, even when we are mourning the loss of loved ones or are desperately afraid for ourselves, we can find the deeper truth that life and death are always intertwined. Just as we heard in our Time for All Ages this morning, the most important question is not what happened to you, but instead, how can we live and play and engage with one another no matter our abilities? The question is not how long we will live or how perfect our health may be, but how we do service to the great gift of life that we are given. As Mary Oliver so famously asked, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? We still grapple with the pandemic and other communicable diseases. Reverend Kelly was supposed to join me in this service, but ironically, she was sick this week and lost her voice. Illness is here among us. It always has been. We just could pretend not to think about it so much before. The question before all of us is to think about what health can look like. The health of our spirits, the health of our communities, that we can acknowledge loss and limitation and yet still thrive to live fully into love. Again, from Mary Oliver. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear petals of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are headed home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. May we offer that place to one another. May we find that place in our hearts. Amen. Let us join in our final hymn, For All That Is Our Life, number 128.
Sing of thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad. For needs which others serve, for services we give, for work and its rewards, for hours of rest and love, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our love. For sorrow we must bear, for failures, pain and loss, for each new thing we learn, for fearful hours that pass, we come with praise and thanks for all that is our love. For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise, for all life is a gift which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Please remain standing and take the hand of someone close to you if you wish. If not, please just offer one another a blessing. My colleague Victoria Safford wrote this for our benediction. May we remind each other and remember that where love is, there dwells the holy, and we are a part of it and part of one another, fully incarnate and beloved. Please remain standing as we extinguish our chalice together. Teamwork. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of vision. As we go forth, let us heal and transform ourselves and our world through reason and love. Amen.
Feeling the spirit deep inside.